Sponsored by. In a bold statement, Israel vowed to exact revenge on Iran a day after Tehran launched hundreds of drones and cruise missiles against Israel. However, his strongest ally Joe Biden clarified that the US won't participate in Israel's retaliation, clearly hinting that US President wishes to de-escalate the Middle East conflict. On the intervening night of Saturday and Sunday, Iran threatened to escalate the Middle East war as it launched more than 300 missiles at Israel over 5 hours. Nonetheless, the Israeli military successfully intercepted 99% of them. The attacks by Iran early on Sunday marked the first ever direct response by Tehran towards Israel because until now, in support of the Hamas terrorists, Iran's proxies such as Hezbollah were bombarding Israel. However, with unwavering confidence, Israel thwarted the attack by Iran in an unparalleled manner, as stated by IDF's Yoav Gallant. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu heaped praises on the Israeli military, asserting that the country intercepted and contained the attacks by Iran. The Iranian strikes triggered air raid sirens throughout Israel early Sunday as the military worked to intercept the Iranian projectiles. IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagri confirmed Saturday night that the much-anticipated Iranian retaliatory strikes had begun, while Israel swiftly responded by launching numerous fighter jets to counter Tehran's attacks. It was on April 1st that Iran announced suspected Israeli warplanes bombed Iran's embassy in Syria, targeting 7 of its military advisors, including 3 senior commanders. Nonetheless, Israel never claimed responsibility for the attack, but braced up its security for Iran's potential retaliation. Meanwhile, one of the closest allies of Israel, US President Joe Biden, told Netanyahu that Israel and the US had won because the US assessed Iran's attacks had largely been unsuccessful and demonstrated Israel's superior military capability. But at the same time, Biden cleared it with the Israeli counterpart that the US will not participate in any further offensive operations against Iran. The move, which comes as a significant setback for Israel, clearly highlights Biden's intentions of not letting the Middle East war escalate and spread in the entire region. How Israel-Hamas war resulted in Israel versus Iran. The Israel-Hamas war began ever since Hamas on October 7 first launched a brutal attack on Israeli soil, killing thousands and taking hundreds of hostages. In retaliation, Israel launched a counter-offensive operation called Operation Iron Swords, targeting Hamas terrorists in Gaza, backed by Iran. Nonetheless, in a matter of couple of days, the Hamas terrorist group was backed by other Iranian proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthi militant group from Yemen, both of whom came out in support of Hamas. While Hezbollah attacked from the northern border, Houthis disrupted maritime security in the Red Sea and in the Gulf of Aden. Though Israel kept on intercepting the drones and missile strikes fired across the northern Israeli borders by Hezbollah, it was essential for Jerusalem to let Iran know that enough is enough. The attacks on Israel by Iranian proxies raised fears of an escalation of the already volatile situation in the Middle East, and thus decided to take on Iran by attacking the Iranian embassy in Damascus. The Israeli strikes on Iran marked a huge deal for Tehran since 3 of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps senior officials were killed in Israeli strikes. How the world reacted. Pertinently, Iran's mission to the United Nations justified the retaliatory strikes against Israel, stating that Iran's military action was in response to the Zionist regime's aggression against our diplomatic premises in Damascus. The matter can be deemed concluded. It must be noted that when Israel struck the Iranian embassy, Iran's UN mission asserted that Tehran reserved the right to take a decisive response, but also added that the strike could threaten regional peace and security. At the same time, Israel's one of the strongest allies, the United States, came out with the US ironclad support to Israel, and Joe Biden gave his Israeli counterpart the assurance that the United States will stand with the people of Israel and support their defense against 3 threats from Iran.
I want to address the Iranian threat they're threatening to launch a significant attack on Israel. As I told Prime Minister Netanyahu, our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad. We're going to do all we can to protect Israel's security.
Ever since Iran stated that it would retaliate against Israel and that the Jewish regime would be severely punished, the US came out in support of Israel, rushing warships, bracing the defense systems, ensuring ironclad support, and letting the world know that Israel is not alone in the war against the terrorists. However, the US has clarified that it won't participate if Israel takes revenge for the Iranian attack. At the same time, India expresses serious concerns at the escalation of the hostilities between Israel and Iran, which threatens the peace and security in the West Asia region. The Ministry of External Affairs also called for immediate de-escalation, exercise of restraint, stepping back from violence, and return to the path of diplomacy. It stated that the Indian embassies in the region are in close touch with the Indian community, adding that it is vital that security and stability are maintained in the region. Other countries such as Britain, Canada, the European Union, the Czech Republic, Germany, and many more came out in support of Israel, severely condemning Iran's strikes against Israel and urging Tehran to not escalate regional conflict. Why Israel-Iran conflict is a geopolitical crisis. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had in 2022 told Russian President and his friend Vladimir Putin that it is not an era of war. When the country had invaded Ukraine, yet a year later, the world witnessed a second war in the Middle East triggered by Hamas terrorists.
Excellency, मैं जानता हूं कि आज का युग युद्ध का है नहीं.
The strikes by Iran against Israel marked a major escalation in the already volatile situation in the Middle East. Though the World Peace Organization, the United Nations, has time and again drafted resolutions to call for an immediate ceasefire and release of hostages, the world leaders have miserably failed to put an end to the war despite knowing of the global consequences of the war. The situation in Palestine is equal to that of famine, while the civilians are struggling for aid and food. The Israel-Hamas war is a geopolitical crisis, possibly even more profound and far-reaching in its global impact than the Ukraine war. Besides Palestinians, another set of people who could be facing the wrath of the war in the Middle East is the Jewish community, against whom anti-Semitism has been on the rise even since the war began on October 7. Global leaders have always pinpointed US President Joe Biden for his unwavering support to Israel. The world, however, believes that it is Joe Biden who is fueling fire into the war. Many global leaders were outraged when the US vetoed a UN resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in the war. Nonetheless, in the course of 6 months, President Biden's stance on the war changed, probably because of the world pressure to regain another term in the US presidential elections in November. However, while on the one hand, Biden gave an ultimatum to Netanyahu against any escalation of the war, on the other hand, he nodded to a deal regarding arms transfer to Israel. And then came the threats of Iran's retaliation, where once again the US stood shoulder to shoulder supporting Israel, barely predicting how the conflict could hamper the already grave situation in the Middle East. As of now, no injuries have been reported in the Iran versus Israel conflict. Nonetheless, it is expected that Iran's retaliation would unfold over the hours. While world leaders have come out in support of Israel in this difficult hour, they have also urged both nations to exercise restraint and avoid civilian casualties as much as possible.